This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Hannah.
And I'm Jamal Dejani.
Jamal, in a cataclysmic, absolutely destructive loss for Kamala Harris and the Democrats, we're here to talk about the fact that the Trump presidency, President-elect Trump, is here for another 4 years. President Trump, otherwise known as 47, won in a landslide victory, getting over 300 electoral votes, taking the Senate by a wide majority, and as it looks today, Jamal, is going to win a House. So we have the White House, the executive branch. We have the legislative branch, both houses going to the Republicans, and a deeply conservative Supreme Court. We are on the precipice of a major transition within the United States. And I hate to rub it in a little bit, Jamal, but I predicted all of this. We're going to be talking about the election and whether or not Trump and his presidency will end the war in Gaza. We're also going to talk about a late-breaking news event that happened in Amsterdam recently, Jamal, in which Israeli citizens who were in Amsterdam for a soccer match between Tel Aviv Maccabi and the Amsterdam team got into fights. The two sides got into a big brawl on the streets, and the way the media has been portraying it has been not reality. So we're going to talk about the real story of the riots in Amsterdam. Before we get to that, we're going to, in continuing our election news, Jamal, we're going to hear an interview that you did with former field organizer for the Biden 2020 campaign in Detroit and Dearborn, Michigan, Abu Salah. He's going to explain how Kamala Harris alienated Arab and Muslim American voters and lost Michigan, which ultimately, Jamal, as we look at what happened, Kamala Harris lost in Michigan, and not by that much. So it looks like her alienation of Arab, Muslim, and Palestinian voters was a cataclysmic failure of the Harris campaign.
Yeah, and we should remember that Michigan was the state that put Donald Trump over the top, over the 270 required votes, and that's what happened. I mean, it played like I would say, what you predicted, just basically. What I have to say to congratulate you on your prediction, because you've been for many months saying the same thing, and it ended up with your home state, Michigan, which basically put Donald Trump over the top. And in fact, when we had the interview with Adam, Arizona the results from Arizona has not come through yet. So the final result is really 312 for Trump to Harris's 226. Let's watch the interview with Adam. On Tuesday, Donald Trump was elected the 47th President of the United States in a decisive victory over Democratic contender Kamala Harris, carrying 295 electoral votes versus her 226. Trump carried all the critical battleground states where the results were ultimately decided. He prevailed in Pennsylvania, carrying what was a must state for either candidate to win. He also outperformed Harris in the state of Michigan, which had overwhelmingly supported Biden in 2020. This pushed the Republicans over the top to take a decisive majority of electoral votes and determine Trump's victory in the presidential elections. The Harris campaign's missteps were multiple and avoidable, with her continued dismissal of Israel's genocide in Gaza, key to Michigan voters abandoning her. All along, there were clear warning signs that she was alienating not only Arab and Muslim Americans, but young progressive voters as well, by failing to distance herself from Biden's unconditional support for Israel's carnage and ongoing supply of American weaponry to carry it out. As the campaign progressed, voters started to peel away, first with a large block of the uncommitted voter movement that gave a strong showing during the primaries, with some holding fast to this position while others defected to Green Party's Jill Stein and later Trump, whose campaign made strategic outreach to them. Joining us again on Arab Talk this week to talk about the election outcome in Michigan and the impetus that drove it is Adam Abu Salah. He's a former field organizer for Biden in 2020 and the co-founder of Project 1948. Subsequently, alienated by the Biden administration and its support for Israel's genocide in Gaza, he urged others in his Dearborn community not to vote for Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential elections. Welcome back to Arab Talk, Adam.
Thank you for having me.
You represent three voting blocs. One, the youth movement. Two, Arab Americans. And the third, Muslim Americans who live in the Dearborn, Detroit area. I want to revisit your previous avid support for Biden in 2020 and how he and then candidate Kamala Harris subsequently alienated you with the Gaza genocide and Harris's refusal to condemn it or stop sending weapons to Israel. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. What we saw on Tuesday was a shocking, some shocking results, not only here in Michigan, but in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and other states as well, all swing states. What we saw was people coming out in historic numbers in certain communities and expressing their anger, expressing their frustration, and expressing their disgust with this administration. For over a year now, we've been telling the Democratic Party, we've been saying you are losing voters in Michigan, you are losing voters in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and other states. Change course so that you can regain some of the support and hopefully win in November. We told them, we warned them, you have to change course. Recognize human rights for Palestinian children, recognize what is happening in Lebanon, and recognize the human rights for the children and the women in Lebanon, recognize that, and they refuse to do so. For over a year now, we've been saying Democrats are very quick to say after a school shooting to Republicans, thoughts and prayers are not enough. And we were saying to the Democratic Party, your thoughts and your prayers are not enough for the children in Lebanon and in Gaza. We need your action. And one thing that kept coming to mind was that if Democrats are not willing to do the right thing when they need our votes, why should we believe that they are going to do the right thing after they are elected and they do not need us? That is not something that I could just believe. And what you saw on Tuesday was people coming out in record numbers saying enough is enough. And we are not happy with the way that that this administration is handling things. We saw people leave the top of the ticket empty. We saw people vote third party for Jill Stein, people who wrote in names. And we did see people who were very frustrated and who were able to stomach it and vote for Donald Trump. Overwhelming support for Donald Trump here in Dearborn and in Dearborn Heights. Is this something I am proud of? Absolutely not. I think Donald Trump is a threat to our country, a threat to democracy, a threat to the people in Lebanon and Palestine. I think he's a threat to everyone. He's not somebody that I am proud is president. He is somebody who is a convicted felon. He is somebody who is dangerous. But the fact of the matter is this, that the Democratic Party has been talking about Donald Trump since he first got elected in 2016. They've been talking about him for the last year. And they've been telling the American people he is dangerous, he is a threat, we need to stay away from a Trump presidency. But Arab, Muslim, pro-peace, anti-war American voters, but people in other communities were saying, you know what, enough is enough. And some people stomached it and voted for this guy because of their disgust with the Democratic Party. What we need to know now is what is the Democratic Party going to do moving forward? And they should have had a plan for this on November 6th. What are you going to do moving forward to bring people back into the Democratic Party, including Arab, including Muslims, but including the different communities that you alienated? The night before the elections, I got a text message from one of my friends who was a white man that I went to school with. And this school is in up north Michigan. All white people, a lot of times Trump supporters. This is a white man that texted me and said, I want you to know that I'm not supporting Kamala Harris in tomorrow's election because of what she's doing in Gaza. I spoke to a black elected official in Wayne County, in Detroit, who told me I am not voting for Kamala Harris because of what they are doing in Gaza. This is not something that we are seeing just with Arab and just with Muslims, just with young people, just with progressives. This is something that people are saying enough is enough. You know, people say, well, you are a one issue voter. Palestine and Lebanon is not one issue. It is an issue of moral. It is an issue of why are we sending billions of dollars to a foreign nation to bomb children when we have homeless veterans sleeping on the streets, when we have people in this country who are dying every single year simply because they have no health care. So people are saying enough is enough, and we are no longer going to stand, and we're no longer going to vote for people and protect people in this administration who are complicit in this genocide.
So I don't know. I don't know if it was Kamala Harris's decision or her advisors whispering in her ear. But we've mentioned earlier the missteps she took. You've mentioned about I've talked about also she had attempts to outreach to the communities and. I recall when she came to talk to the community and people were asking her about Gaza, and then she snapped back saying, I'm talking. If you want Donald Trump, keep acting like this," because you mentioned about the threat from Donald Trump. So that was the only kind of outreach message she was sending to the Arab and American communities, basically threatening them with Donald Trump. Well, now we have Donald Trump. She didn't have anything else. Then I wanted to talk about adding insult to injury. The DNC former President Bill Clinton sent former President Bill Clinton as a surrogate to basically lecture Palestinians about how the people in Gaza deserve the genocide being perpetrated against them because Hamas is using everybody as a human shield. In addition, that Israelis were entitled to revenge. How outrageous was that?
You know, look, the overwhelming sentiment here in Dearborn and across the state and across the country with Arab Muslims and pro-peace anti-war voters was, you know, you killed 60,000 in Lebanon and in Gaza. You displaced 3 million throughout Lebanon and throughout Gaza. You made us watch members of our family being burned alive in hospital beds with IVs still stuck in their arms. You've made us watch fathers collect the remains of their children into plastic bags. You've made us watch all of that with our tax dollars. And then on top of that, here in America, you did not allow for a Palestinian to speak at the DNC when the largest union in the country, the UAW, said that we need a Palestinian to speak at the DNC. You didn't allow for that. You came to our state, and as soon as we started chanting and talking about our families that are being murdered in Gaza and Palestine and Lebanon, you started saying, if you want Donald Trump to win, keep saying that, otherwise I'm speaking. You then sent Bill Clinton to the state to talk about that why the genocide and the killing and the bombing of children and seeing children with heads blown off, that it's justified. You sent Obama to come lecture us about morals and values and that we need to talk about Kamala's character. Kamala's character for me is somebody who is complicit in genocide, period. And you know, people overwhelmingly they said, listen, not only are they going to kill our people overseas, they're going to treat us like garbage here in America. Why are we going to continue to support these people? And people said, I remember a White House correspondent asked me, he said, even if it means Donald Trump gets elected, I said, that is not my fault. We have been saying for over a year, we have been telling the Democratic Party for over a year now, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to say. This is what you need to do. And you can get these people back. For over a year now, we've been saying three lines. No ceasefire, no arms embargo, no Michigan. And we did not get a ceasefire. We did not get an arms embargo, and they did not get Michigan. Donald Trump won this state. He won the state of Michigan by less than 80,000 votes. Less than 80,000 votes. In Dearborn and in Dearborn Heights, we got over 80,000 people to go out and vote for the presidential ticket. You got over 40,000 people who voted for Jill Stein here in Michigan. You got tens of thousands of people who left the top of the ticket empty who voted third party. And you got people who stomached it and voted for Donald Trump. I truly believe, and statistics prove it, that Arab and Muslim pro-peace anti-war voters in Michigan could have flipped this election and Harris would have won Michigan. The problem now is the Democratic Party has a problem. They lost people in Pennsylvania. They've lost 30,000 votes was the difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris in Wisconsin. Do you know how many people voted uncommitted in Wisconsin? Much more than 30,000. So they lost people across this country because of what they are doing in Gaza and in Lebanon. My question to the Democratic Party is this. It was very clear to me and to many people that the Democratic Party did not realize and understand their lesson in 2016 when they lost to when they lost to Trump. When Trump won Michigan by by a little over 10,000 votes. My concern is that they did not learn their lesson in 2020 and in 2022 when Dems barely won. My concern now is, are they going to learn their lesson after 2024 when Donald Trump, a convicted felon, a rapist, whatever you want to call him, they were calling him garbage, but he beat them. He won the popular vote here in America because people were tired of the Democratic Party. People kept feeling they were alienated by the Democratic Party. You can't control how people feel. Whether people feel like they had more money in their pockets under Donald Trump or whether they feel like they cannot vote for you because you are complicit in a genocide, you can't control how people feel. The reality is the Democratic Party failed the American people. They failed themselves. And they need a real plan to gain a lot of people back into the Democratic Party after what happened this past Tuesday.
President-elect Trump now, on more than one occasion, did visit Arab and Muslim communities in Michigan. He has talked positively about the Muslim communities, thanking them for their support, praising them. Do you think that this is authentic? That's the first part of the question. He states that he is against war in general, as opposed to Democrats who have transformed into a warmongering party, taking in so many neocon supporters. I'll give you one example is Kamala went campaigning heavily with Liz Cheney, as if that the Arab and Muslim communities had forgotten that her father was responsible for the death of more than 1 million Iraqis for basically for a lie. Was this another miscalculation?
Absolutely. That was another miscalculation. Look, there were ads that were running in Dearborn and Dearborn Heights that said Kamala, pro-war, loves Liz Cheney, anti-Muslim. The fact of the matter is this. I do not believe that anybody running for president of the United States was authentic. I do not. I don't trust any of them. I don't believe any of them had our best interests at heart. I do not believe that. The fact of the matter is this. Donald Trump, whether you like the guy or hate him, had an outreach plan to Arab and Muslims, and he did it, and clearly he did it very well. The fact of the matter is this. Donald Trump let imams speak at his rally. And the fact is, Kamala Harris had Muslim Americans at her rallies here in Michigan, but across the country, and she kicked out Muslim Americans out of her rallies. She kicked out women who were wearing the hijab. She kicked out somebody like Ahmed Ghanim, who ran for Congress in the very area that she was in and got tens of thousands of votes.
Right.
And she kicked them out of her rally. The fact of the matter is this. Donald Trump had a plan, and he had people come to Michigan who spent days and weeks in Michigan with outreach to the Muslim and to the Arab community. How many people did Kamala Harris allow from the Muslim community who was wearing a Muslim, religious clothing get up on stage and speak? Zero. Whether you like the guy or hate him, whether he's authentic or not, Donald Trump said to people what he wanted. He literally, all he said, whether I believe it or not, whether anyone believes it or not, Donald Trump just said, I want peace, and people voted for him. That shows you that Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party failed by not even doing the bare minimum. Not only Arab and Muslims, not only in Michigan, people across the country said, listen, this is what you guys need to do. And for over a year now, auto workers, members of unions felt alienated. Black men and women felt alienated. Latino, Mexican men felt alienated. People felt alienated all across. And they've been telling the Democratic Party, this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to say. The fact of the matter is, the Democratic Party failed to do what people warned them about. They told them this is what you need to do, and they failed to do it, and now it resulted in another 4 years of Donald Trump. And the person that is responsible for Donald Trump being president today, I blame 3 people for Donald Trump being president today: Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris.
Well, that's very strong. I think I agree with you on this. On the other hand, it's not just the Democratic Party. For example, Rashida Tlaib was re-elected by a high margin of 70% of the votes in Michigan's 12th congressional district, more votes in her district than Kamala Harris for her presidential bid. doing twice as well as Harris in Dearborn, which tells you that people vote for someone who is in tune with their community, and basically Kamala Harris was totally out of tune with their community, and you know, totally basically deaf to their demands.
I had one person, and it's funny that after everything that we've gone through as a community, after seeing all the people that were killed in Gaza and in Lebanon, I had one person come and tell me the reason you guys are not supporting Kamala Harris is because she's a black woman and because she's married to a Jewish man. And I told him, I said, Rashida Tlaib, a woman of color, we vote for overwhelmingly in our community. But the fact that the point that I want to address is this. He said we are not voting for Kamala Harris because her husband is Jewish. When Bernie Sanders ran for president in Michigan, Bernie Sanders in the heavy Arab and Muslim precincts in Dearborn won 90% of the vote. When did you ever see a contentious primary for president of the United States where somebody gets 90% of the vote in a precinct? That you don't see that. But Bernie Sanders, a Jewish man, got 90% of the vote in precincts where it was heavily Arab and Muslim. My grandmother, who passed away this past February, the first time she voted was for Bernie Sanders. My grandmother, a Palestinian who left Palestine, the first time she ever voted was for a Jewish man to be president of the United States. So when you want to talk about our community and you want to say that our community is being anti-Semitic, that's not true. We don't care who you are, where you come from, or we care about what you say.
Well, they're the biggest supporters of Jill Stein as well.
Jill Stein. There's another example. Look, respectfully, people in the Arab and Muslim community, majority of the people that supported Jill Stein, they didn't support her because she supports a Green New Deal. They didn't support her because her support for Medicare for all. They didn't support her because her support for the for rights. They supported her because of her support for Palestine. It's simple. You know, right before the election, the Democrats came up with these last minute tactics. They said swap the vote, where it was a strategy, a failing strategy, where somebody in a safe blue state will vote for Jill Stein and you vote for Kamala Harris if you're in a swing state. We don't need these last minute tactics. We don't need that. What we needed was one simple thing: stop bombing children, and you could earn some support back. And they wouldn't do that.
There was also some pressure on the community exerted on them to vote for Kamala Harris, as though their votes weren't theirs to cast. We've heard this from several prominent Arab Americans, for example, James Zogby and others, who were saying, well, hold your nose. Maybe she's not the best person. Hold your nose, but still vote for her. And of course, this did not work. Why?
It's because people are tired of the same old, same old. You had a few people in the community who were willing to support Kamala Harris because they were afraid of what a Trump presidency would look like. But for the overwhelming majority, for people who have family in Palestine and in Lebanon, people whose families were killed. I have a friend of mine who lives in Dearborn. Her father lived in Dearborn. He was an American. He was a taxpayer. He was an American who was visiting his family in Lebanon. He was killed in an Israeli airstrike. Do you think that if I went up to her and I told her, you need to vote for Kamala Harris because Donald Trump is worse, what could be worse for her when her father was just killed? The fact of the matter is, listen, you cannot scare us with what a Donald Trump presidency would look like. That was a fact. People ended up voting for Kamala Harris. That is true, because they were afraid of what Trump would do. And that is real. But the only person or the only people that I blame for a Trump presidency right now is the Democratic establishment, the Democratic elites. I was afraid of what a Trump presidency would look like. I knew what a threat of to our country Donald Trump would be. My thing is that I just don't think that Kamala Harris and the people around her understood that as well. Because if they did, they wouldn't be campaigning in Michigan with Liz Cheney. They would be talking to Arab and Muslim voters about how they could bring people back into the Democratic Party, and that is something they refuse to do. They refused multiple times to meet with leaders from the Muslim community. They refused multiple times to meet with the uncommitted team. They refused, and their refusal was basically them saying, "Listen, we are willing to take a risk at losing your support. We're willing to win this without your support." Now you have Donald Trump who was elected the 47th president of the United States.
What's next for the community? I mean, do you feel, is there something that's going to convince them to return to the Democratic Party? Which I don't know even if the Democratic Party is, what's going to happen to the Democratic Party after
Again,
this?
look,
Are they going to, for example, think about ending this duopoly and start moving towards the Green Party or other, representation?
Look, I don't think that's the case. We have somebody like Sam Beydoun, who's the Wayne County Commissioner, who introduced and pushed for a ceasefire resolution very early on, and it passed overwhelmingly in the largest county in the state of Michigan. We have somebody like Rashida Tlaib, who is a Democrat congresswoman, who was the first Palestinian American woman elected to Congress, who is unwavering in her support for human rights. That's it, human rights. These are people who are Democrats. Abdullah Hamoud, the mayor of the city of Dearborn, who is a Democrat. These are people that we are proud of, that we will continue to vote for. Rashida Tlaib, you just saw, we just voted for her overwhelmingly, who is a Democrat. We do believe that we will continue to organize within the Democratic Party. And what we are not going to do is we are not going to wait for the Democratic Party to tailor their messaging and their policies for us. We're not going to wait. You either accept us with the conditions that we have, and you either allow us to organize and you allow us to lead in the Democratic Party. Because if one thing we learned on Tuesday is the Democratic Party needs to change its leadership both nationally and here in Michigan. You either allow us to do that, but while you wait to make that decision, we are going to start organizing somewhere else. And people, whether you think it's a good idea or not, people in the Arab and Muslim community found a home in the Republican Party. And people are finding homes in other places. People are finding homes in voting third party. And guess what? All that work resulted in a Donald Trump presidency. The thing is, Democrats really need to learn their lesson. And my fear is that they didn't learn in 2020, they didn't learn in 2016, and I just don't know that they're going to learn their lesson now in 2024.
Adam Abu Salah, thank you for coming on Arab Talk.
Thank you for having me.
That's the voice in the face of Adam Abusalah, the former field organizer for Biden 2020, talking about the utter failure of the Harris-Walz campaign and the Democratic Party to engage with Arab, Muslim, and Palestinian American voters in the Detroit, Dearborn area and throughout Michigan, and I would have to say throughout the country, Jamal. I mean, this, what Adam says and what we've been talking about for months and months and months, it seems like the Democratic Party is in a deep decline, but also in very deep denial. This election result is very, very profound. And I don't know if the Democrats are going to wake up and see what utter failures they have done. The Democrats, because of their failure to acknowledge and understand the voter and how the voters feel about the economy, how they feel about Gaza, how they feel about genocide. Basically, the Democrats delivered Donald Trump to the United States and to the world. And I don't know if they have the honesty, Jamal, the forthrightness to actually confront how they failed the world.
They're actually in big denial. That's the key word. And they've been talking about it and pointing the fingers at each other and casting blame here and there, but they don't want to accept the fact that they have basically failed the party, basically those who voted for the Democratic Party. And we should remember that Kamala Harris has now been defeated by close to 7 million votes. And the votes for the Democratic Party, she currently has just over 69 million votes compared to Biden's of 81.2 million votes in 2020. So you could see the difference, of almost 11 million votes.
Yes.
That she lost in 4 years. And then the question will be like, well, where did these votes go? Not to the Green Party, because people like to play this, which only increased its tally by about 300,000 votes from 4 years ago. And they basically, these votes, of course, 300,000 went extra to the Green Party, but many of these votes went to Donald Trump, and then the vast majority of people didn't vote. They just decided we're not going to vote for someone who has supported genocide, and that's what the media tried to avoid. Like they'd like to talk about the economy, which is true. I mean, foreign policy does not play a major role in how Americans vote. They vote with their pockets, and that's just goes on and on for so many years. However, I mean, there isn't a single factor that was decisive in explaining her failure. But Gaza and the genocide became a symbol for all of that.
Well, it became a symbol of the failure of Kamala Harris, the failure of the Democratic Party, the failure to acknowledge reality, the deep denial and unwillingness to kind of confront where people are at in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, on balance, and the majority of which are against war. They're against the genocide in Gaza. They want freedom and self-determination for Palestinians. So that was in fact a major issue. But Kamala Harris did not lose, Jamal, because she's a woman. She did not lose because she's a Black woman. She lost because she had no message. She had no moral clarity. She turned her back on, millions and millions of young voters and progressive and more liberal elements of the Democratic Party, and basically refused to acknowledge that she was a supporter of genocide. She tried to play both sides. I think what this says, Jamal, is that Joe Biden, Genocide Joe, Kamala Harris, Killer Kamala, Schumer, Pelosi, all of the Democratic elites completely failed this country, completely failed the world, Jamal. They misread the situation. I am not prophetic. What I was seeing was in front of everybody's eyes. It's not like I had a magic crystal ball, but I've been saying for years, the Democrats are missing this. The Democrats are not seeing this. The Democratic support, unwavering support for Israel and for the war machine is going to come back to haunt them. They're not listening to people. And, we've been saying this, maybe I've been saying it more loudly, but you've been saying the same thing for years now. And as a result of that deep denial, the Democratic Party is in shambles. Young people don't want to associate with the Democratic Party. They feel like the Democratic Party has failed them. This is such a strong statement. And then you have Nancy Pelosi going on the New York Times for an interview and basically saying she did not believe that this was a repudiation of the Democratic Party. Nancy Pelosi, whether or not she is in cognitive decline like Joe Biden, I don't know, but she's deeply delusional. They're all delusional, Jamal. And I hope this sends a message to Schumer, to Biden, to Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, the Obamas, the Clintons, all of whom have been standing steadfast with the Israeli genocide in Palestine. And this should be a lesson to all of them. They failed the world. They failed the United States. They failed Palestine. And now they're paying the price.
Delusional and in denial. Those are the double D words, Jess.
Yes.
And Kamala Harris made it clear from the outset that she had no intention of moving away from Biden's genocidal policies in Gaza. I mean, to me, that was basically the statement that she made that destroyed her. I mean, when everybody is like demonstrating against the genocide, when everybody is angry with Biden, when everybody was watching Biden in decline throughout those 4 years, to come out and say, I'm not going to be any different. I'm going to continue the same policies. I mean, of course, she tried to walk that. It was too late for her. And that's what happened. This is, this is really the summary.
But Jamal, they're not taking any responsibility. The elite.
Because they're in denial. I mean, that's the problem. They are so disconnected with the streets. Basically, they are so disconnected with the young people. What do you say about a party that didn't listen when she was like telling people, "I'm speaking now to young people who question the policy of the Biden administration"?
But do you remember what she said? If you want Trump to win, keep talking. I mean, she said that to them.
Well, that's exactly the fear tactics didn't work for her. That's what they thought. They just gonna scare off young people with Trump, scare off Muslim Americans with Trump, telling them about the Muslim ban, whatever. And let's also give kudos to Trump. He was so smart that he went to Dearborn and Detroit area and met with Muslim Americans, had lunch with them, basically. And he was endorsed by many of them because, as I've said, some of the votes went to Jill Stein, but the rest went to Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right, Jamal. And, however many years ago, 8 years ago, when Trump won and beat Hillary and everyone was saying Hillary's going to win, it's not even close. Hillary's going to win by 8 points. And I was saying, you're all delusional, man. You're all delusional. This is not where America's at. People didn't listen.
Well, here's the thing before I lose my thought about they didn't listen, just because they didn't listen to the masses. They didn't listen to the young people. And what they relied on, celebrities, Beyonce, bringing on stage all these celebrities, people, it's exactly a Clinton redux. They did the same thing. They thought that if they brought all these celebrities to support her, that she's going to win. That didn't work. It just tells you, I'm actually happy about that, because I'm sick and tired of like thinking that one person or one woman or one man will influence the millions of people. Like, why would Beyonce's, for example, opinion count more than the hundreds of thousands of students on college campuses?
You're right.
Or Oprah Winfrey, or any of these celebrities and millionaires and billionaires.
I think you're exactly right, Jamal. And, a special kind of criticism has to go to Obama and the Obamas, right? Because here you have Barack Obama lecturing black men on what they should do. Exactly. Guess what black men did, Jamal? They did two things. They voted for Trump or they didn't vote. And so, lecturing African-American men on what they should do, pointing your finger at African-American men, having the elites, having billionaires, having all of these Wall Streeters. And Wall Street, by the way, crafted Kamala Harris's economic plan, and nobody bought it. Nobody bought it. And
because people are hurting. Inflation is real. They try to deflect from inflation. Inflation, all that you have to do is go to your local grocery store or restaurant or wherever, and you'll see the difference in the prices from 4 years ago.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jamal. I mean, they were tone deaf. The Democrats are tone deaf. They're tied to their elite beliefs, and the fidelity and unquestioned kind of fidelity to a genocidal state like Israel cost them. And I think the Democrats, I don't believe they have the intellectual capability or the emotional capability to deeply reflect at how the support for Israel and the support for a genocide cost them this election. They're not going to be able to do that. And then I have another prediction to make, Jamal. Donald Trump for 4 years, J.D. Vance for 8 years. I think we're in for 12 years, Jamal, of a deeply conservative shift to the right because of the inability of the Democrats to really speak to and listen to where people are at. They failed. They failed us. They failed the middle class. They failed the world. And, now they're pointing fingers at Arabs, at Muslims, at progressives. They have nobody to blame, Jamal, but themselves.
Well, here's the question which we started the show with before we move on to our next topic. What do you think Donald Trump will do when it comes to Ukraine, because he promised to end the war, and the war on Gaza?
you're not going to like my. I don't think people are going to like my answer. I actually think he's going to end the war in Ukraine, but the way he's going to do it is by throwing the Ukrainians under the bus. I mean, he has said what his plan is. He wants Ukraine to basically, there's going to be a territorial loss. There just is. He's going to put pressure on Zelensky to negotiate with Putin. And Putin's going to have to give up some things too, apparently. But I think he's actually likely to end the war in Ukraine, but on very, very kind of difficult circumstances for the Ukrainians. It's really going to be difficult.
What about Gaza?
Yeah, I mean, Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas has had 3 conversations with Donald Trump since he won. In fact, Abu Mazen was one of the first people to call Donald Trump after he won. With all of the kind of things that have been happening, including the closing of the Hamas office in Doha and Qatar, there's a chance that only Donald Trump could get the Israelis to stop the genocide. I don't think it's going to stop the occupation. I don't think it's going to stop the settler colonialism, but he may be able to at least put a stop to the genocide. But we'll see.
Moving on to our next story, Jess, and this is the craziest story.
It's bizarre.
And you know what's bizarre about it? Is
the media. It's the media.
Not just the media. The media and American politicians haven't learned their lesson to stop repeating like parrots or parroting what the Israeli government and Hezbollah and Mossad feed them, and they just do it, right? So to summarize the story, so I'm sure everybody read or saw one version or another about what happened there, but basically there was a game in Amsterdam where Maccabi Tel Aviv went there, and Israel brought thousands of its fans to Amsterdam. And
days before, Jamal,
days before. Now, up to the day before, just nothing happened. No one attacked the Israeli fans. No one met them at the airport or the streets until they started destroying personal property. And there are several videos to prove that, climbing on buildings, tearing Palestinian flags. Then they moved on to target brown people, thinking that they are all from the Middle East, Arabs, and of course there are Turks and Arabs and people from Northern Africa and so forth, by attacking taxi drivers, beating up taxi drivers. And the day off, these fans again we're actually gonna show a video as we're speaking here. These fans were chanting, as they were going down the escalator or going to the stadium, let the IDF win, to F the Arabs. That's one of the chants. There are no schools. Do you know why there are no schools in Gaza? Because all the kids are killed, and so forth, right? So they started it all. The media and politicians decided to omit all of this.
Exactly. Including the prime minister.
Including everybody. They decided to omit it, including the media like Skyline News, which actually had a report showing what happened, and they pulled it off after, probably got a call from the Mossad or Benjamin Netanyahu. So these fans who, for days were, I shouldn't say fans, they're hooligans, really, the correct description, thugs and hooligans. And they got their behinds beaten afterwards, after people got sick and tired of them. And we saw that on video, and which, by the way, many of them are either reservists or served in the Israeli army. But, this is what happens. When the Israelis don't have weapons and they don't have Apache helicopters to target women and children in Gaza, and they go somewhere else and it's become man-to-man, they run like cowards. And you saw them running like cowards, getting beaten. And then, of course, that's when the media starts working its engines, and that's when the American politicians and European politicians starts calling these are, when Israel started marketing stories under the title "Savage Islamic Migrants Attack Peaceful Jews," and it's an anti-Semitic attack, and then they expand it or elevate it to pogroms against Jews, and the Israeli government social media accounts exploit the event to the maximum to market and justify their genocidal war on Gaza, and rally Europeans around their cause in defending against terrorists. You could see it's like the whole scenario, how it unfolded. And
Yeah.
I think it was all planned. It's like really to vilify Arab and Muslims migrants in Europe, to antagonize them, then play victim.
Yeah, I think that's a good analysis, Jamal. I have something to add to that. I think the other part of it is the Israeli mentality of we can mess with anybody, anytime, anywhere. They have this sense of invincibility because of what they've been able to get away with by world leaders, not by people in the streets, because globally people do support Palestine. They're against Israel. They're against the genocide. But they have this delusional idea, speaking of Democrat delusion, Israelis going to Amsterdam and feeling like they can insult the Dutch, insult another country, come in basically, excuse my language, take a crap on another country and not have the Dutch and the people of Amsterdam say, you can't treat us this way. And so, yeah, I saw the same video. I dug deeply into this. Everything you said is exactly correct. In fact, I had read further reports that even 2 days before the match, Jamal, as some of the Israelis were coming into Amsterdam, they were already causing trouble. 2 days prior to the match, they were already like defacing public property and kind of issuing and yelling racial slurs and doing graffiti. I mean, you come to another person's house and you desecrate it, if not defecate on it, and you don't think that the community is going to do something in response. I think this topic for today, Jamal, the through line through our talk today is delusion of something or another, because the Israelis are just as delusional, thinking that they can go anywhere and use the same militarized tactics in another country with the civilian population and not have a response.
Well, I mean, look, the disgusting part about it is what I started with. Soccer matches always attract hooligans.
Right.
And we've had incidents, actually, I'm a big soccer fan, that British hooligans used to go to other countries like France,
right,
and create havoc, that the French government prevented them from entering the country. They had to ban them for several years. They were destroying stadiums and attacking people and whatever. And by the way, I should mention that Israel lost 5-0, and that's why they were also humiliated on top of that. But I've never heard a politician condemning the British fans. I've never heard a politician say anything about a soccer fan. In fact, I never heard anything here, because most Americans don't watch soccer. Let's be frank about it. It's not the number one sport in this country. To have senators, congressmen, Biden, Secretary Blinken, all of them, it's just like a machine working for the Israeli Hezbollah. We condemn this act of anti-Semitism and so forth. Just they got what they got, their words or their marching orders from AIPAC, and they repeated this. When the evidence was clear, the chief of police of Amsterdam actually had a press conference and said what I've said. And he said, this is how it started. The Israelis, they started attacking personal property, attacked the taxi drivers, and then these people had enough and they came after them. And that's what happened. And then, we have the American politicians who just are like parrots, basically, start condemning what happened in Europe and calling it an act of anti-Semitism. In fact, Jewish organization in Amsterdam condemned what the Israelis had done.
Of course they did, Jamal. But you know what was interesting to me also? Al Jazeera reporter was at the press conference with the prime minister, the Dutch prime minister, and they confronted her on this. And she kind of fumbled with her words and said, oh, but this is anti-Semitic and blah, blah, blah. In the face of all this reality that the Israeli thugs came to another country, desecrated it, were threatening and were provocative, didn't even make it when the reality was presented to the prime minister, the Dutch prime minister. We should also say, Jamal, that Benjamin Netanyahu sent a bunch of El Al planes. They quickly evacuated all the Israeli citizens from Amsterdam. But I think this is going to reverberate throughout the world, Jamal. I mean, basically, people are not going to take this, this garbage, this rubbish from anybody. You come to our country and then you spit on us and you don't want us to respond. So I think this is going to be an interesting time period, Jamal. We're still waiting for the ICC to issue its arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and the former defense minister Gallant. The war, the genocide in Gaza, the occupation and the attacks in the West Bank and Jerusalem are continuing full steam ahead. The world is still in global solidarity with Palestine, Jamal. So we will see what happens when Israelis go anywhere else in the world. How will they be greeted?
You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco 89.5 FM. Go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download the latest shows, and we'll talk to you next week.
See you next week.